The alien girl asked to team up together. They did the impossible the moment he opened his eyes. The sky above him was red and filled with loud sirens. Jake sat up quickly, gasping for air. Not knowing where he was, the ground was hard, cracked, and smelled like smoke. Huge steel walls surrounded the place. Stretching high into the sky, he was in a massive arena. But it wasn't like anything on Earth. He looked around and saw strange creatures, some tall and armored, others crawling on many legs. They weren't human, not even close. His heart beat faster, panic rising inside him. He had no weapons, no food, no clue what was happening. All he had was a strange bracelet on his wrist, blinking red. Then a loud voice echoed from above, speaking in multiple languages, including English. "Welcome to the Alien Hunger Games, where only the strongest survive." The voice laughed cruelly as giant screens showed the faces of the contestants. Jake saw himself on one screen, just a regular human guy among monsters. Everyone was staring at him like he was already dead. One creature, covered in thick spikes, pointed at him and growled. Another laughed in a clicking language, baring sharp teeth. Jake stood still, trying not to show fear, but he knew he was the weakest one here. The games had begun, and he had no allies. No plan, just fear. But deep inside, something told him not to give up suddenly. Something moved fast through the crowd. A slim alien figure, cloaked in a dark robe, rushed past others and stopped near him. She pulled down her hood, revealing icy blue skin, glowing eyes, and long black hair. Her voice was soft but firm. "You're human." Jake nodded slowly, unsure what she wanted. "They'll kill you before sunset if you stay alone," she said, looking at the others. Then she leaned closer, her body cold against the heat of the arena. "My species. We need warmth to survive," she whispered. "Your body heat could keep me alive through the night." Jake blinked, confused. "What?" She stared into his eyes. "Serious. Team up with me. Human, or we both die." He looked around again, saw the hungry faces watching, some already forming groups. His instinct screamed not to trust her, but what choice did he have? She held out her hand, and he hesitated, then grabbed it. Her skin was freezing, like touching ice. She shivered, even in the hot wind. "What's your name?" he asked, as they moved behind a broken pillar for cover. "You wouldn't be able to say it," she replied, "but you can call me Lyra." Jake nodded. "I'm Jake." They both crouched as a group of armored lizard aliens marched nearby. Lyra held her breath and pressed close to him, sharing his warmth. That night, when the arena's sun vanished, the cold came fast. The ground froze, and the wind howled like a beast. Jake curled up beside Lyra, her arms around him, her body trembling. He didn't know if this was part of the game or something deeper, but the fear of freezing was stronger than any doubt. "I don't usually trust anyone," she whispered, "but something about you feels different." Jake didn't answer, only nodded, too tired and cold to think. They lay there in silence, listening to distant screams, growls, and crashes. The death games had truly begun. And already, players were being hunted. Jake could hear the sound of laser shots and bone breaking in the dark. He held Lyra tighter without thinking, her cold slowly fading with his touch. In that moment, neither of them cared about winning or losing. They only cared about making it to the next sunrise. But far above, hidden cameras zoomed in, broadcasting their fragile alliance to the galaxy. The audience watched with interest, some amused, some angry, others very curious. "Sleep now," Lyra whispered, her voice softer than the wind. "Tomorrow, we kill or be killed." Jake closed his eyes, heart still racing. He had entered the arena alone. But he wouldn't face the next day by himself. Not anymore. The sky was still dark when Jake opened his eyes. His body ached from the cold ground, but something warm pressed against his side. Lyra was curled close to him, her face peaceful, her breath slow and even. Her blue skin, once icy and stiff, now looked soft, almost glowing. Jake didn't move, just stared at her for a moment, wondering who or what she really was. All around them, the death arena was silent. Not peaceful silence, but the kind that came after something terrible. Far in the distance, smoke rose. From shattered towers, a few screams echoed, followed by a sound like metal tearing flesh. The games hadn't stopped during the night. They had only gotten worse. Lyra opened her eyes suddenly and gasped, her hands grabbing at Jake's chest. Her eyes glowed for a moment, wild, then calmed when she saw him awake. "You're still alive," she whispered, her voice rough from sleep. He gave her a weak smile. Barely. She didn't laugh. Just rested her forehead against his shoulder. "My species can't survive cold," she said quietly. "We come from frozen planets, but only because we've adapted, Jake. Didn't understand, so you freeze to death if you don't touch someone warm." She nodded, her fingers brushing over his skin like she was still trying to steal his heat. "Our organs slow down. Stop moving. We go into sleep." Then silence, she whispered. Forever silence. Jake looked at her face, and for a moment, he saw something fear, real and raw. He stood and stretched, scanning the land. The arena had changed again. Parts of the ground cracked open, some places now flooded with dark water. Massive alien beasts flew overhead, their shadows covering everything in black wings. Lyra joined him, wrapping her arms around herself. Shivering again despite the rising sun, she looked fragile but moved like a predator. "Always alert, always ready. We need to find shelter," Jake said, "someplace safe before night returns." Lyra laughed dryly. "There is no safe place in the arena, only places where death takes longer." He glanced at the sky, at the metal drones hovering above them, watching they're enjoying this. He muttered, "Whoever's running this game." She looked at him and said something strange. "Not just them. The entire galaxy watches. You're the only human here, remember?" That thought hit him hard. He wasn't just fighting for his life. He was entertainment to billions of beings who didn't even speak his language. He didn't belong here, and yet, somehow, he had to survive. As they walked through the cracked land, they passed the ruins of a fallen tower. Bodies were scattered nearby, some burned, some sliced. All dead. Jake tried not to look. But Lyra stopped beside one of the bodies. She bent down and pulled something from the dead alien's chest, a sharp metal spike shaped like a jagged tooth. "This can be a weapon," she said, handing it to Jake. He took it carefully, feeling the sharpness with one thumb. They kept walking, slowly, staying low. Every now and then, they'd hear something moving in the shadows. But whatever was watching them didn't attack, not yet. Jake started to notice things. Signs scratched into walls. Old paths marked by dried blood. People have died here again and again. He whispered. Lyra didn't respond, her eyes fixed on something ahead, a large stone archway. Hidden behind smoke and half buried in sand, Jake followed her through it. And they found a small cave-like space inside. It was dark, but the air was dry and warmer than outside. "This will do for now," she said. Sitting down and hugging her knees, Jake sat beside her, leaning against the cold wall. His body was tired, but his mind raced. "Why did you choose me?" he asked, looking at her. She tilted her head, her glowing eyes meeting his. "Because you looked like the only one here with nothing to lose," she replied. They sat in silence again. The world outside full of death and madness. Jake stared at the small light on his wrist bracelet, still blinking red. He had no plan, no map, no weapon except a broken spike. But he had Lyra now, and that was something, maybe even everything. As he closed his eyes for a moment, He heard a whisper, not from her mouth, but deep inside his own head. It was her voice, but soft like a dream, saying only 4 words, "There." "Coming for us." Jake opened his eyes wide, his heart racing. He didn't know what was happening, but he was sure of one thing. Nallera was hiding more than she had told him. A single drop of glowing green blood landed on Carter's arm. It sizzled against his skin like acid, and he hissed in pain, pulling away. He didn't know whose blood it was, his, Kari's, or the thing that had attacked them in the dark. Everything had happened so fast. One moment, they were resting behind the scorched rocks, trying to recover from the fire trap. The next, something huge and fast had crashed down from the trees. Kari called it a slarbeast. It had metal claws, glowing red eyes, and a voice that sounded like radio static and animal growls. Carter had never seen anything like in art books, not in nightmares, not in movies. The only reason they were still alive was because Kari had screamed. A sharp sound filled with strange alien vibration. The creature paused, confused. By the tone, just long enough for Carter to grab a sharp pipe from the ground and stab it in the leg. Now they were running, again, deeper into the second ring of the arena. The trees here were bent like arches, and the air was full of smoke and dust. No sun, no sky, only shadows. Carter limped. The green blood burned, still stinging on his arm. Kari walked beside him, breathing hard, her purple skin marked with cuts. "I didn't know you could scream like that," Carter said, trying to joke. Kari gave a weak smile. "Neither did I." They stopped beside a fallen pillar, something ancient and covered in alien writing. Carter dropped to the ground, gasping. Kari pulled out a small blue vial and poured it on his burn. It cooled instantly, like ice water mixed with light. "You've saved my life twice now," he said, staring at her. She didn't answer right away, just stared at the writing on the pillar. "This arena was built thousands of years ago," she whispered. "My ancestors helped design it." He raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You mean your people built this death trap?" She nodded slowly. "Not like this. It was supposed to be a proving ground, not a place for murder." Her voice shook, and Carter saw something new in her eyes, shame, maybe guilt, before he could say anything. A red light blinked high above them, a drone. Watching again, they couldn't rest, not here. They moved quickly, toward a cliff's edge where a thin trail led down into a dark canyon. Carter hesitated. "This looks like a death sentence." Kari looked down. "No, it's worse," she said. "It's the trial of fire and blood." Carter sighed. "Of course it is." They descended carefully, their hands gripping wet rock, their feet slipping on mossy stone. At the bottom, the canyon opened into a deep underground chamber, lit by red crystals growing from the walls, and in the center was something that made Carter stopped breathing for a moment. A ring of thrones made of bones. And in the middle, fire, real fire. Their frozen bodies cried for its warmth. But Kari held up her hand, stopping him. "This is a trap," she whispered. "Only the worthy can sit near the fire." "Worthy how?" Carter asked. Kari's glowing eyes looked into his by spilling blood. Carter's stomach twisted. As if answering the question, shadows moved along the edges of the chamber. 4 figures stepped forward. One was a lizard-like warrior, his eyes locked on Kari. Another was a thin gray alien with electric knives in both hands. The third looked human, but had glowing tattoos across his face. The last was a massive creature with metal limbs. They surrounded Carter and Kari slowly. No words spoken, just the promise of violence. Kari reached into her coat and pulled out her pulse flare, the last charge glowing weakly. Carter held his bent pipe tightly, knowing it was useless but refusing to drop it. The tattooed one spoke first. "Leave the girl, human, and you can walk." Away. Carter didn't move. Kari stepped forward. "He's with me," she said, her voice stronger now. The others laughed, then died together. The lizard man hissed, leaping forward. The fight that followed was chaos. Carter barely dodged a blade, swinging wildly with his pipe. Kari screamed again. That strange high alien sound, then the crystals in the walls pulsed in answer. They flickered, then burst, sending shards flying through the air. The lizard man was hit in the neck, collapsing with a gurgle. Kari grabbed Carter's hand and dragged him toward the fire. The electric knives alien followed, but Kari turned suddenly. Slamming her flare into its chest, the explosion lit the chamber in white. Only the tattooed man remained, blood dripping from his shoulder. He looked at Kari with hate, then smiled at Carter. "This isn't over, human," he said, before vanishing into the shadows. Carter dropped beside the fire. Gasping, his hands shaking, Kari knelt beside him, her fingers touching his burned skin gently. He looked at her, looked. Her glow was brighter now, her strength more clear. "You were holding back," he said. She nodded. "I didn't know what I could do." The fire warmed them slowly. Not just their bodies, but something deeper, trust. And for the first time since arriving in this nightmare, Carter felt something small but real, hope. The mark on Kari's back began to glow bright. Strange, alive. Carter saw it when she turned away to scan the cave's far end. It looked like a star had been carved into her skin and buried deep under the surface. He didn't mean to stare. But the light pulsed like a heartbeat, and he couldn't look away. She didn't notice. Or maybe she didn't care. After what they had just survived, silence hung between them like a fragile thread. The cave's fire still burned in the center. But now it crackled lower, colder. They had stayed there longer than they should have. But it was the only warmth they'd known in days. Kari finally broke the silence. "We need to move." Carter stood up slowly, body sore, hands scratched and bruised. He glanced once more at the mark on her back, then looked away. "That thing on you," he said. "It lit up when you screamed." Back there, Kari froze, just for a second, then walked past him, her voice quiet. "You weren't supposed to see that." "See what?" he asked, following her. They moved through a narrow tunnel filled with dripping water and red mist. Kari didn't answer until they reached the other side. Then she turned, her eyes glowing in the dim light. "I wasn't supposed to be in the games," she said. "I was made for war-grown in a lab." Carter blinked, confused. "You mean?" "You're not real," he asked. "I'm real," she said sharply, "just not natural." Her hands shook slightly as she touched her arm. "The market was part of a weapon system my people abandoned. They said I was flawed. Too soft, too emotional." She looked away, voice cracking, "So they threw me into the twee." Hunger Games as punishment. Carter felt a sharp pain in his chest, not from wounds, but from something else. She wasn't just a survivor. She was discarded, like trash. "I don't care how you were made," he said. "You saved my life twice." Already, she gave him a small look. Something between a smile and a warning. "I might not save you next time," she said. They walked on, stepping into a new zone of the arena. The snow was gone now, replaced by black sand and purple lightning dancing across the sky. The air was hotter, sticky, charged with energy. Kari pointed toward a floating platform in the distance. "That's the gate to the inner ring," she said, "but only one team makes it through." Carter narrowed his eyes. "Team," she nodded slowly. "We're still a team." "Right," he didn't answer, but he didn't walk away either. They reached a cracked metal bridge, wide and broken in the middle. Across the gap stood another per two alien females, both with glowing staffs and heavy armor. One of them smiled, her teeth sharp, eyes locked on Kari. "You made it this far, sister," she said, her voice loud and mocking. Kari didn't move, but Carter could see her entire body tense up. "Sister," he whispered, surprised. "She's from the same batch." Kari said coldly, "But she passed their tests." The other girl laughed. "And you?" "You ran to a human for warmth." Kari stepped forward. "And you hid behind armor and lies." Carter stood ready, but his heart pounded fast. This wasn't just a fight, it was something personal, ancient, bitter. The bridge began to hum, charged. With power, a glowing rune lit beneath their feet, and a voice echoed across the sky. "Only one pair shall enter the inner ring." The two alien sisters charged forward, their staffs glowing with electricity. Kari leaped to meet them. No weapon in her hands, just her scream. The air shook as her voice shattered sound itself, bending metal and stunning one attacker. Carter ran in, swinging his broken pipe, clashing with the second sister's staff. Lightning sparked, burning his arms, but he didn't let go. Kari turned and slammed her fist into the stunned sister's chest where her own glowing mark lit up once more. A shockwave burst out, throwing both enemies to the edge of the bridge. One rolled off, screaming into the dark below. The other, barely, clung to the edge, panting, bloody, defeated. Kari stepped close and looked down at her. The sister's voice shook. "You're still a failure." Kari said nothing, only turned away. Leaving her hanging, the gate at the end of the bridge opened. Slowly, glowing white, Carter touched Kari's shoulder gently. "You okay?" She didn't answer for a long time, then whispered, "No," but she walked forward anyway. Together, they stepped into the light, and the bridge behind them vanished. Only one path remained, now deeper, darker, deadlier. And whatever waited in the inner ring was watching them already. The moment they stepped through the gate, the ground vanished beneath Carter's feet. He didn't fall. He floated, weightless, soundless, lost in a sea of glowing red mist. He reached for Kari, but her hand slipped through his fingers like smoke, then nipped out. He landed hard on stone, coughing, air returning in a gasp. Kari lay nearby, eyes wide, chest rising fast. They had been split apart by the transition, then pulled back together like magnets. But everything was different now. The inner ring didn't look like a jungle, a desert, or a frozen world. It looked like a city, broken, twisted, ancient, and breathing. Buildings floated sideways, and stairs led nowhere. Cubes of light hung in the sky like frozen memories. The rules here didn't just bend, they were shattered. Carter stood slowly, looking around. With a hand on his weapon, Kari was already scanning the horizon. Her eyes narrowed. "This is the mind labyrinth." She said, "Nothing is real here." He looked at his hand, flickering slightly, like bad static on a screen. "What do you mean, nothing's real?" he asked. Kari's voice was low, tight with fear. "This is the arena's last defense." She said, "It pulls your memories, your regrets, your pain, then turns them into traps." Carter swallowed hard. "So it attacks your mind. And your heart," she whispered. They walked slowly through the shattered city, passing doors that opened to blackness, alleys that screamed when stepped through. Carter saw a wall that showed his childhood bedroom, but covered in vines. And crawling with spiders, he turned away. Kari paused near a broken mirror that reflected not herself but a dozen versions of her, each with angry eyes and scorched skin. She didn't look long. The place twisted their steps, made circles from straight lines. Each time they tried to leave, they returned to the same empty plaza with the floating statues. Then the whispering began, voices familiar and cruel. "You left me behind," said one voice in Carter's ear. He turned fast, but saw only Kari. "No, I didn't," he said out loud, breathing hard. "You're not real." Kari grabbed his shoulder. "Don't speak to them," she warned. "They grow stronger when you listen." He nodded, trying to focus on her voice and nothing else. But then Kari stopped walking, frozen still. Carter turned to her and saw her staring into an open chamber where a young version of herself stood. Small and crying, the child wore the same robe Kari once did. Her arms tied in chains, her voice echoing. "Why didn't you fight back?" the younger Kari asked. "Why did you let them throw us away?" Carter stepped forward, but Kari lifted a hand. Her eyes locked on the vision. "I wanted to fight," she said, "but they took my voice." Her real voice cracked, her hands shaking. "But now, I take it back." Suddenly, the vision shattered. The child melting into blue light. The chains fell to the ground and cracked like glass. Kari exhaled sharply, tears running down her cheeks. Carter said nothing, just stood by her side, silent and steady. They kept walking, and finally the plaza broke apart, giving way to a long hall filled with soft white light. At the far end, a single throne sat alone, made of bone and glass, and seated on it a creature with no face, only a shifting mass of eyes and mouths. Kari whispered. The architect Carter raised an eyebrow. "That thing built this nightmare." She nodded, "And it watches the final test." The architect's voice echoed without sound, a feeling more than words. Only one may pass. Kari and Carter stood together, not moving. "We're not playing that game," Carter said, stepping forward. The floor cracked beneath him, and spears of light shot up, but Kari raised her hand, her mark glowing brighter than ever. The spears melted into dust. Kari stepped beside him. We moved together. The architect twisted in shape, screeching silently. Then a new floor rose, smooth and golden. A path forward opened not to one, but to both. The architect had been broken. The rule changed. Carter looked at Kari, eyes wide, breath tight. "You did that?" he said. "No," she replied. "We did." They stepped forward side by side, past the throne, into the light. The mind labyrinth collapsed behind them, piece by piece. And for the first time since the games began, the arena didn't just tremble, it obeyed. Carter didn't notice the blood on his hand until Kari took it in hers. It wasn't a deep wound, but it pulsed with heat, not pain, but something else, energy. Her mark glowed brighter as she held him. And the wound slowly closed. He looked at her, confused, breathing hard. "What was that?" Kari didn't answer right away, only stared at the place where his skin had touched hers. "That wasn't healing," she said softly. "That was a bond reaction." The light in the sky above them shifted as she spoke. Changing from red to violet, the architect was gone. The mind labyrinth behind them had collapsed. But the game still continued. Before them stood a wide arena, open skies, tall pillars, soft winds, and a single gate on the far side. Carter could feel it, deep in his chest, that they were close to the end, but something didn't feel right. The silence was too clean, the wind too soft. "Why is it so quiet?" he asked. Kari didn't move. "Because we're being watched more than ever." She pointed toward the skies, where floating drones circled like tiny moons. "Final round," she whispered. "All eyes are on us." The rules had changed. The architect had been bypassed, but the game masters still had one final card to play. And they were going to make it hurt. A sudden boom cracked the sky, and from the far gate, someone stepped through. A human. Carter blinked, stunned. The man wore dark armor, his face sharp and familiar. "Darian," Carter said, voice flat. Kari looked at him. "You know him?" Carter nodded slowly. "He was part of my squad. Before everything went bad." Darian stopped a few steps away, staring at Carter with cold, steel-gray eyes. "You made it this far," Darian said. "I didn't think you had it in you." Carter stepped forward, fists clenched. "You left us to die on Vecros." "I made a choice," Darian replied, "and it got me here." Kari moved beside Carter, glowing softly. Darian looked her over, his expression darkening. "So that's your little alien pet," he said, smirking. Fitting, Kari said nothing, but the ground beneath her feet cracked slightly. Carter didn't move, didn't blink. "Why are you here?" he asked Darian. Shrugged. The audience needed a twist. Final match to humans. One winner. Kari stepped forward. "Then they've already lost." The wind screamed suddenly as Darian pulled a blade from his back. Glowing dark blue with venom energy, he charged without warning. Carter pushed Kari aside and blocked the first strike with his broken pipe. Sparks flying, their weapons clashed again and again. Metal on metal, past against present. Kari circled them, her hands ready, her mark glowing brighter every second. Carter fought hard, but Darian was faster, trained, stronger. One blow knocked Carter to the ground, his weapon sliding away. Darian raised his blade, but Kari moved. "Between them, you'll have to go through me," she said. Darian laughed with pleasure. He swung, but his blade hit a wall of glowing blue energy. Kari stood tall, her body surrounded by swirling light. Her mark had fully awakened, reacting not to the game but to Carter. Darian tried again, slashing and screaming. But each strike was absorbed into the light. Kari lifted her hand, and the ground rose like a shield, knocking Darian backward. He rolled, coughed, and stood slowly, rage in his eyes. "You don't get it," he said, spitting blood. "Only one can win." Kari helped Carter up, never looking away from Darian. "We're not here to win," she said. "We're here to end it." At those words, the sky shook, and the watching drones began to spin faster. The audience across the galaxies was watching, and they were confused. No betrayal, no bloodbath, no final winner. Just two people standing together, refusing to break. Darian charged again, but this time Carter was ready. He caught his old squadmate's arm, twisted it, and forced him to the ground. "End this," Darian gasped. Carter looked at Kariv, then back at the man who had once left him to die. "No," Carter said, stepping back. "I'm not your weapon." Kari turned toward the gate, now glowing white. It was open. They didn't win by killing. They won by surviving together. Carter walked toward it with Kari by his side, leaving Darian behind, broken but breathing. And as they crossed the final line, the game shut down. The sky blinked. The drones powered off. Silence again, but this time it was peace. Kari looked up at Carter, her voice steady. "You gave me more than warmth," she said. "You gave me reason." And in the quiet after the games, their bond was stronger than any prize. The cheering didn't sound like joy. It sounded like hunger, sharp and cold. Echoing from unseen speakers across the sky, Carter stood on the glowing platform, but it didn't feel like victory. He looked at Kari beside him, her eyes scanning. The floating drones one last time. The arena was gone, melted into digital dust the moment they passed through the gate. But the watchers, those hidden creatures behind screens across galaxies, were still there. Waiting, hoping, craving more. Carter clenched his fists, not out of fear, but something deeper. "Disgust. We survived their game," he said. "But we're still part of their show." Kari stepped closer, her voice soft. "Then let's end the show." The platform rose slowly into a great silver chamber. Round and silent, a figure awaited them at the center, tall and covered in reflective glass armor. No face, no voice, only a presence. The voice came from everywhere at once, smooth and inhuman. "You are the first to finish together. You have earned freedom." And admiration. Carter didn't speak, but his jaw tightened. Kari raised her chin. "What happens now?" The voice hesitated. "That is undecided. No one was meant to win this way." Carter stepped forward, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Then decide something new. The figure tilted its head, the light flickering across its armor. Kari touched the mark on her chest. Tit pulsed once, sending a ripple through the air. Suddenly, the lights dimmed, and the drones above began to fall one by one. Not crashing, not destroyed, but powering off. A silence spread like a wave, reaching far beyond the chamber. Across all broadcast channels, the signal had been cut. The show had ended. Carter looked around, unsure what they had triggered, but Kari stood still, breathing deep. This arena wasn't just inside the games, she said. It was inside us. The only way to break it was to refuse to play. The armored figure lowered its head, as if in understanding or defeat. The chamber opened behind them, revealing a true sky, not a digital one, a field of stars stretched out like a dream. Real, clean, endless. Carter stepped forward and felt the wind again, not cold or burning, but natural. They had not just survived the Hunger Games, they had broken them. A transport ship hovered nearby, waiting without guards. No chains, no orders, no countdowns. Carter turned to Kari, his voice quiet. "Do you think the rest of the galaxy saw what we did?" She nodded slowly. They didn't see a fight. They saw a choice. He reached for her hand. Not because he needed warmth, but because he wanted it. She didn't pull away. They stepped onto the ship together. Not looking back, the chamber faded behind them, the arena shutting down for good. And as the stars welcomed them home, the only sound left was the soft breath of peace. Kari rested her head on Carter's shoulder, eyes closing for the first time without fear. "You're not like the others," she whispered. He smiled. "Neither are you. No trophy, no crown, no applause, just two survivors walking away from a nightmare and proving to every world watching that in the darkest places, even in cruel alien games, hope could still burn brighter than fear."